Me, 25 male, with my wife, 23 female, she informs me at sister's wedding she had slept with best man, long. Update. First, I'd want to explain something from my first post that I didn't really lay out very clearly. It doesn't really have any bearing on anything, but for some reason it bothers me that I left this section a little hazy. My wife's maid of honor married the groomsman with whom she went down the aisle. Some people thought my wife was attempting to organize the dance, but I know for a fact that this portion was legitimate. That doesn't mean she didn't offer to let them dance or engage in any other type of manipulation, but I just wanted to clarify that up a bit. I'm here because I've had over 40 requests for an update since last week. Thank you for your concern about this, and I wish I could make some bold statement about how I stood up and kicked her to the curb, but that is not what occurred. To put it bluntly, I'm in limbo. There have been changes, but they have just made it more difficult for me to make a decision. I was largely furious last week, but as the weekend went, I became mostly sad. I want to be able to despise her and turn the switch that tells me I'm being walked on in MMA, but it's difficult for me to do so since I still love her and this is tearing me apart. Here is a summary of what has occurred of any significance. She eventually realized that I was not going to simply get over this. This led her to believe that I could desire to leave the marriage. This resulted in her having a nervous breakdown. Someone, well, a lot of people, said in the initial post that she'd attempt to manipulate me like that, and trust me, I was taking those comments to heart when I believed she was crying crocodile tears. But it quickly became clear to me that she wasn't acting or pretending, she was experiencing a genuine panic attack. This resulted in an ER visit, which resulted in an overnight stay in the hospital, new meds, and a planned follow-up with her doctor for the next week. This drew her relatives into it, which resulted in lengthy discussions all around. I asked her what she wanted to do when we arrived home, with her family in tow, since there was a house full of people, and she indicated she wanted to stay with her mom for a bit. That was great with me since I didn't want to spend the whole day with her dad or sister, so I said I'd go finish up stuff at work and would return home later. I receive a text from her 2 hours later imploring me to please come home and that she really needs me to speak to her. So I complete what I was working on and go home. Her father approaches me on my front porch and asks if he may speak with me for a moment. My rage was already strong, but I was prepared to go to war if she had dropped of lies on me with her father. I mean, we're not best friends or anything, but I've never had a terrible time with him, so I wasn't going to be thrilled about being the jerk who shattered his baby's heart. We sat in our deck chairs, and he stunned me with his first salvo. I was anticipating something else than what he said. He said she told them what had happened and that he wanted to apologize to me because he felt like he did a terrible job as a parent and that this mindset she had was really a creation of her mother's and that while he loved both of them, he said they were wrong and that he had told his wife years ago that telling the girls that whatever happens before marriage doesn't count was a terrible idea and value system to instill in them. He then stated that he was not there to defend his daughter's actions, but rather to make me aware that what she was saying and how she was acting was simply because she honestly believed that being married was an entirely different life and that they, mom and dad, had romanticized marriage to the point where she didn't understand real life. Basically, he was putting his wife under the bus, which was not at all what I expected. We shook hands, and he told me that no matter what I chose, he still thought highly of me, which made me feel extremely wonderful at the time. I immediately stepped inside, where my wife is curled up in a ball on her mother's lap, clearly weeping the whole time I was gone. Mom gets up and walks over to me, hugging me and telling me how sorry she is, how much she loves me, and how she hopes we can work this out. My wife is now snoozing on the sofa. Her parents depart, and she sits there weeping and staring at me. Okay, here is where I'm going to everyone off and simply tell you that I couldn't handle it any longer. I approached her and we embraced for a long time, with her repeatedly telling me how sorry she was. Hey, I realized that was a weak thing to do, but in my defense, I have to tell that shortly before this event happened, I loved her with all of my heart and would have done everything to not see her in agony. Whatever she had done, I still didn't want to see her in misery. Look, it's quite conceivable that she was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance, but I honestly doubt it. She seemed to be broken at the moment. When she calmed down, I asked her what she wanted me to speak about when I got home, and she said she wanted to get everything out in the open so I didn't feel lied to or misled. So she asked me to ask her questions, and although I wish I had made a list, I came up with a handful off the top of my head. She was brutally honest with me, and some of the questions I asked definitely shouldn't have been asked since the mental picture is now lodged in my head, but it was there already, and I simply now have proof. I first asked for dates, or at the very least approximate dates. I didn't tell her about my engagement worries since I didn't want her to modify her tale, and she recalled precisely when they happened. Fortunately, this occurred earlier in our relationship than she first told me, and we were not engaged at the time. I can't tell you how relieved that made me feel, since I got physically sick when I thought about it after someone mentioned it in my last article. Second, I inquired as to the number of times. She went too far with this, telling me how many different dates there were instead of simply how many times there was penetration. She wasn't being cruel, she honestly felt that was what I wanted to hear. This section of the dialogue did not assist me at all and almost broke me down. In reality, it didn't happen all that frequently, and there were only 3 distinct days when it did, but it occurred numerous times within those 3 days. Then came the difficult part. What made her do it? Okay, I'm not the most masculine of guys, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but I couldn't get this out without crying. I questioned why I wasn't good enough, why and why she didn't simply leave me alone. It was her time to hug me, since everything was rushing at me at this moment. Her telling me having to watch them laugh, her now telling me how many times they did it and where they did it. She spoke at this time, but I have no clue what she said. I was too distraught to listen, and honestly, nothing she said would make a difference. But, after I had gathered my thoughts, I simply informed her that the betrayal was horrific, but her reaction to me when I found out was just as bad, if not worse. She agreed with me and apologized for referring to me as immature. She said that she really felt it wouldn't matter to me now that we were married. When she said this, my blood started to boil again. I tried to say something, but she cut me off and said that after chatting with her parents, she now recognizes that this was extremely wrong of her and that cheating is cheating, but she still believes that our happiness as a couple should count for something. I immediately said that I felt like happiness was founded on a falsehood. This resulted in another breakdown on her behalf and almost another trip to the ER. But, with the help of Ativan and having her breathe into a paper bag, we were able to calm her down. I let her sleep the rest of the night, feeling like we were both emotionally exhausted, but by Sunday, we were chatting again. I wasn't as empathetic as I had been when we arrived home from the emergency room. I told her that I felt her introducing him to me was terrible, that having to see her dance with him was even sicker, and that the fact that she only told me because she was afraid of being caught was bad on steroids. I immediately wanted to know why she thought I'd find out and how many other people at the wedding knew besides me. Obviously, the man knew, but his closest buddy in the world also knew. Did I mention that F is now my brother-in-law, which led to her sister finding out and her being worried her sister would be the one to tell me. When I inquired how frequently she sees this person, she stated the wedding was the first time she had seen him in 3 years. Then I lost it and asked her whether she him throughout the wedding preparations. She got all off about it, acting as if she wouldn't anybody because she was married, and I just lost my and had to leave for a bit because I felt like she was living on Married Planet or some such nonsense, where the world is a different place than for the rest of us. I eventually calmed myself enough to return home and attempt to be pleasant. She eventually asked what she could do to help me get through all of this, which may not seem like much, but it was the first time she volunteered to assist me, so it was a kind gesture. I told her I wasn't sure what she could do or if one of us could do anything, and that I may never get over this. She claimed she wanted to assist because she didn't want to see me in agony and that she hopes I'll be able to judge her based on who she is now in the future. She was willing to go to any length to help me solve my problem. She also wanted me to know that she has been completely true to me throughout our marriage and would never break her vows. I thanked her sarcastically, which, I admit, wasn't the most adult thing to do. I then requested a halt to further discussions until at least Wednesday. I have 2 tasks that I need to do, and I'm honestly fatigued, and I have no idea what I want to do. I go through phases of rage where I want to throw her out and phases of profound emotional pain where I simply want to forget about it and move on with her. Yes, I realize this isn't what anybody wanted to hear, and no, I'm not proud to write it, but that's what it is right now.